Cloud. This webinar is going to be recorded and posted on the State Water Board's website, so stay tuned. The slides from today are also going to be made available to everyone who's participating and posted on the State Water Board's website as well. Please use the question and answer function in Zoom to submit your questions. We're going to be monitoring those and we'll take pauses every once in a while in order to try to address some of those questions. We'll definitely have time at the very end to address anything that was not covered during the webinar. If there are any questions that we're not able to cover during today's session, we will send out an email that includes answers to those questions. So everything should hopefully be addressed. So let's get started. So today's agenda, we're going to provide some context of why we've been doing all this. We're going to talk about our SAFER program and our needs assessment. We're going to talk about what state small water system and domestic well data we're collecting. There's going to be a real deep dive into the Equus software, the new CLIP portal for domestic wells, and a demonstration on how to use it. We like to start off talking about this scope of work really with the human right to water. Back in 2012, the board adopted and recognized the human right to water, which is that every human being has a right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water, adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. This led eventually to Senate Bill 200 passing in 2019, which really solidified a lot of different programs underneath a whole new program at the Water Board called the SAFER program, the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience. It's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially what this is it's a new funding program at the State Water Board with additional authorities as well. It allows the State Water Board to fund and implement consolidation and regionalization projects. We collect new data to help target outreach. There's a strong focus underneath the SAFER program in assisting communities served by state smalls or domestic wells that are interested in consolidating or identifying long-term solutions. If you're not familiar with the SAFER program, I do encourage you to check out our website. There's a lot of work that's happening underneath this program. And there is, I can't stress this enough, there is funding available to support local solutions. How much money you might ask? The SAFER program in particular receives up to $130 million per year. We do combine this with other water board funding available. We do put out an annual fund expenditure plan that discusses how we prioritize this funding. You will see that we have priorities for state smalls and domestic well systems in addition to our public water systems. The State Water Board is also prioritizing state smalls and domestic wells in a number of different ways. Right now, we are focusing on trying to collect data and information so we can help focus where we prioritize our on-the-ground efforts and funding. We are working on trying to see how we can help fund counties to develop programs to address local needs. We are implementing a regionalization pilot project, which would include state small water systems and domestic wells. And we're also implementing a point of use, point of entry pilot project. Again, I really encourage you to check out our website if you want to learn more about what we're trying to do underneath the SAFER program. We are also conducting what we call a annual drinking water needs assessment. We have a risk assessment, a cost assessment, and affordability assessment. And this giant assessment, if you will, again, is used to help prioritize where we focus our efforts at the Water Board and our funding. What I really want to call out, though, is one of our risk assessments is specifically focused on identifying at-risk domestic wells and state smalls. If you haven't checked out our aquifer risk map, this is how we are using current water quality data and locational data collected from our county partners and from our labs in order to help us prioritize our work. So if you're interested in, well, how is all this data being used by the Water Board? Go check out this map. It's a great tool and resource and was recently updated with new data. But I really want to focus on, well, why are we doing all of this again? It is required. We have this great program. We have really great funding resources and tools in our tool belt. But if you need to point to some sort of regulatory language or legislative language as to, well, why do we have to do this? It's right here. It's in Health and Safety Code 116772. The first phase of the requirements has already passed, which was by January 1st. Our local health officers needed to provide the State Water Board data associated with water quality testing performed by laboratories for state small water systems and domestic wells. And then by January 1st, 2022, so current month right now, this data needs to be submitted to the state electronically. And that's the big part of this effort that we're talking about today, is how do we move from collecting this data in paper files ad hoc to electronic data submission of state small water quality data and domestic well water quality data. For folks who are kind of unfamiliar with the definitions of what is a domestic well or a state small water system, we wanted to include that in here for you. A domestic well means a groundwater well used to supply water for domestic needs of an individual residence or a water system that is not a public water system and that has no more than 4 service connections. A state small water system means a system that for the provision of pipe water for human consumption serves at least 5, but no more than 14 service connections, and does not regularly serve drinking water to more than an average of 25 individuals daily for more than 60 days out of the year. So what are the submission requirements? We've been working with counties over the last year in order to build out what we call a state small water system basic inventory and facility inventory. This is critical for collecting the water quality data that's required underneath SB 200. We need to be able to associate the water quality data with a particular water system. The way that CLIP works for public water systems, we're expanding that to take in state small water system data. But in order for CLIP to work for state small water systems, we need to have that facility inventory. We have to add that to SWRCB so that CLIP can reference that SWRCB database in order to allow labs to select that water system when they're in CLIP to submit water quality data. We did send a letter out to all of our county environmental health officials, highlighting the counties that have complied with providing their facility inventory for state smalls. If you have not already done this, I encourage you to work with Jeffrey on our team, because if we do not have that facility inventory in CLIP, we will not be able to accept your data. Labs will not be able to submit and comply. So we really want to make sure that we get that inventory completely filled out in SWRCB. So please work with us to get that done. For domestic wells, we've been asking for counties to provide their most basic domestic well inventories or well profile. What we are asking for is the APN or the parcel number, a permit number if you have it. There is a spreadsheet available on our website and that Jeffrey has been sharing with counties. We are trying to start to build out our first ever domestic well database. We are asking for labs to use a new EDD or electronic data deliverable. And it's going to include some data points that labs may not already be collecting when it comes to domestic wells currently. And we've contacted a number of labs, and one of the data points that kind of rises to the top for most of them is they don't often require an accessible parcel number or an APN with the sample data in the chain of custody. So we encourage you to kind of ask for that data. It is required for reporting purposes. We are going to be collecting this data as it comes in through labs, and we'll be working with counties over the next year to develop a process on how to associate what we call orphan water quality data to domestic well inventory data, since it's going to be difficult to associate water quality data with incomplete inventories in our database. So something that's coming soon And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Jeffrey, I am seeing a chat here from Butte County asking for the spreadsheet for domestic wells. If you could provide a hyperlink to that, that would be great.
Yes, working on it now.
Awesome. Okay. To circle back, the state where, today's call really is going to focus on domestic well water quality reporting, because the state small water system water quality submission process through CLIP is the exact same as it is for public water systems, and pretty much all accredited labs that we're talking to today are already familiar with that process. The only thing we want to highlight is that some state small water systems may not appear in the CLIP inventory because we have not received them from the counties yet. So if you have water quality data from a specific state small water system, you can't find it in the CLIP inventory, we encourage you to contact your county to let them know that you're unable to report this data to the state because they have not completed their inventory yet. We do encourage you to check out the resources page for the current water system CLIP portal. You will use that portal to comply with the state small water system reporting requirements. That is pretty much unchanged. It's just expanding to allow for state small water quality reporting now. Most of the changes, or what's new, is around the domestic well water quality reporting. This submission process is very, very similar to what we have for public water systems, but it does have its own login and a few different requirements, which is why we wanted to provide this training today. We do have a new EDD for domestic wells only that has been made available and includes the data points that are required or voluntary for that EDD. We do have a portal that does have all of this information. The hyperlink is in the PowerPoint slides. Again, these slides will be made available to everyone participating today. I see a question in here from David. Would the state small water system only be reporting source chemical data to CLIP? Bacteriological data would not be required. Is that correct? That is correct for now, David, because the CLIP portals, both the ones for public water systems and state smalls, as well as the domestic well CLIP, currently do not accept bacteriological data. We are working with our vendor, with Earthsoft, internally to see how we can expand our CLIP platforms to allow for bacteriological reporting. All right. I'm going to keep moving, and then I'm going to circle back to the questions afterwards. The required fields for domestic well reporting that are really unique to the domestic well ED is we are looking for the originating county source. So where that sample was taken, what county was that in, the exact location, which county. This is going to help us when we're taking the data into our database of record here at the water board to try to see if we can share that data with the appropriate county, and they can help us identify what well that water quality data may be associated with. We are requiring the assessable parcel number. Again, that is the location of where that well may be. We do acknowledge that you can have multiple wells on one APN, but that is something that we're dealing with in our databases, and hopefully we'll have a better long-term solution for better statewide well identification. And then we are looking for the sample point descriptor. It will be one of these 4 options. So interior faucet, spigot, storage tank, or wellhead. So these are the required data points. Again, we've talked to a few laboratories, and these are data points that they may not have already in their own databases or requiring. So we are flagging these so that changes can be made in how data is collected and stored before submitting to the state. And Jeffrey did provide in the EDD template, there is another spreadsheet that includes the definitions for these new data points and all of the data points collected in the EDD. Here's a breakdown of the voluntary fields. So these are not required, but very much appreciated if the data could be provided to us. If the county permit number is available for that well, definitely would be helpful to have that information. The domestic well ID, which is a new ID that's being generated by the Safer Clearinghouse, the State Water Board's database of record for domestic wells. When a new inventory is added to that clearinghouse, we generate a new domestic well ID. The well type, either new or existing. The Oscar number, which is a unique identifier that's generated when a well completion report is submitted to the Department of Water Resources. The domestic well address, and the latitude and longitude of the domestic well. Again, these are voluntary fields, but would be very much appreciated if provided, again, to help us really identify where those wells are located. We can't stress this enough, but counties and their labs need to coordinate updates to the chain of custody to account for the new domestic well data fields that are required and or voluntary. It is just really important that we're able to really identify where these wells are located, where water quality data is coming from. I want to talk about where this data is going and what the future holds for our collaboration with counties on state small and domestic well inventories and water quality data. A lot of you have heard us talk about the Safer Clearinghouse. It's a new database and tool that we've been developing at the State Water Board to help us manage data related to the Safer program and help us with program implementation, and to really make our data more accessible and user-friendly to navigate. I think a lot of you who've worked with SWRCB and some of the other State Water Board tools can attest that those are fairly clunky systems. They're really old. So we are trying to build something out that's new and more user-friendly. This is going to be the flow of data coming into the State Water Board for these SB 200 reporting requirements. Bottom line here is that SWRCB will be our database of record for state small water quality data, and the Safer Clearinghouse will be our database of record for domestic well water quality data and inventory data. Our hope is that the Safer Clearinghouse will be the portal used by counties to maintain their inventories of state smalls and domestic wells so that you do not have to be in SWRCB ever again. You will have access to the water quality data that we collect from the labs, and you'll be able to manage and maintain your inventories. And this is just a repeat of what I just said. We are currently building out the Safer Clearinghouse functionality for counties. County staff will be able to log into the Safer Clearinghouse and manage their data. We are working to allow for batch uploads. We have data validations and checks in here. There will be flags and notifications. We are looking to see if we can actually connect the clearinghouse to county databases to just manually or automatically pull this information so there doesn't have to be any actual data entry from counties into the clearinghouse. So stay tuned on that. But if you are interested in being involved in how we develop the portal for counties and the clearinghouse to access and manage this information, please reach out to us because we want to make sure that you're involved. Your feedback is really critical since you would be the primary users for this portal. Some future needs that we are trying to explore is GIS mapping capabilities with the data that's being collected, connecting our database to DWR's Oscar database, and trying to do a crosswalk between the inventory that we have in our database and what's in Oscar. Okay. Alrighty. I'm going to try to answer a few questions before we jump into the demo. I see in here, why don't you use WQI for lab data? Because we have shifted over to CLIP, both for public water systems and for domestic wells and state smalls, Karen. So there has been a transition over the past year to our new reporting feature. I think there was a question earlier, Jeffrey, and maybe you've answered it already. I saw about whether or not we're collecting historical water quality data and well information. And the answer is yes. It is a requirement in SB 200 that if counties have historical water quality data for domestic wells or state smalls to submit it to the water board. If you have something in electronic format, we can take it and we can import it into our database. Everything we're talking about today, though, is about moving forward with new water quality data that's coming in now. So if you have questions about how to report historical data, please let us know, because we'd love to complete our database going back a few years if possible. Let's see. We've got, is this only for water systems that are not already available in SWRCB and CLIP with PS codes? Why are a non-transit, non-community system that does not serve and already submit data to SWRCB? So again, we are trying to complete the inventory of state small water systems in SWRCB. So Jeffrey has been reaching out to counties to collect their current SWRCB inventory and facility information so we can create a SWRCB profile for all of the state smalls across the state so that CLIP can pull from that inventory and allow labs to submit water quality for those systems. So hopefully that answers your question, Sarah. If not, please let me know. And then Nick is asking, could you explain how well data will be linked to a clearinghouse ID if there's no unique local ID for that well? We have many wells without a record. That's a great question, Nick. So what we're doing is if we receive a water quality result through CLIP for a domestic well that does not include a permit number or an Oscar number, the reason why we're requiring the APN number is that we're going to create a hybrid unique identifier that uses a county code and the APN. If we have multiple water quality results associated with that APN, we will try to work with the county to see if there may be additional wells on that parcel. Again, this is not a perfect system, but we are trying to do our best to create a temporary unique identifier for individual wells within a county until we can get a statewide solution in place for both new and existing domestic wells. What we'll do is when we get that water quality result into the clearinghouse, again, we call it orphan water quality data, we will flag it for the county and say, we just got a domestic well water quality sample for a well on this parcel. Is this a new well that you've recently permitted? Can you provide any additional information like your permit number or or the Oscar number or some other identifier? If it's the reverse, if we have, let's say you've just permitted a new well, you come into the clearinghouse, you add it to the clearinghouse as a new well, we will auto-generate a unique identifier for you in the clearinghouse, which you can then provide to the driller, the laboratory, whoever is then submitting a water quality sample, so that a clearinghouse ID is then attached to that sample. Again, it's a voluntary data point in the EDD. That way, when it comes through and you have access to it, you know exactly which well gets related to. So hopefully that answers your question, Nick. If not, we can definitely dig in further. All right. Let's see. We've got APNs are not always static numbers. Yeah, Rob, we totally understand that. It's frustrating. We are working to see if we can work across the state to identify a better solution for unique IDs for wells. So it's something that the Water Board and DWR are working on right now. And then how will changes to county APNs be handled? Yes, this is something we are trying to think through, and we are open to creative problem solving with all of you. If anyone has suggestions on how to better track this data across the state, we would very much appreciate your thoughts. There's a number of us who meet on a regular basis trying to figure this out. So please let us know if you'd like us to include you in some of those conversations. Yep. someone suggesting lat long. Again, that's very similar to some of our issues that we have with APN as well, and is sometimes difficult to request. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Lots of concerns about APN, which we understand. Another request for the presentation. Yes, this recording and the PowerPoint slides will be made available after today's session. All right, well, I'm going to turn things over to ERSoft to give a demo of the new domestic well clip portal. So I think, Liz, we have you. Awesome.
Yes, thank you so much. I can't share my webcam, but in a second you'll see a picture of me so you can pretend that you can imagine what it looks like when I'm talking. Thank you so much for joining us today. We recognize that this is going to be a change in what the process looks like how about a new process for how all of this works for you. If you have gone through a similar training for the clip process, this is like that, different portal though, so it's a little bit different. The process is different, so you will benefit from that experience if you have it, but it's different. And if what I'm talking about is new information to you, don't worry, we'll be able to cover everything you need to know today. So my name is Liz Herman, and I'm training manager with ERSoft. And so today what we're going to be talking about specifically is an overview of some of the terminology of the things that you'll see when you're loading data to the portal, which is our Equus enterprise site, and basically how you can go through and load that data using a specific format in the domestic well portal, and actually walk through that process together after I show you some example screenshots there, and then any sort of questions that you have about any of that process or anything like that, we can welcome at the end. So first, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Equus. It's the platform that has been chosen for managing this data, and Equus, the odd capitalization stands for Environmental Quality Information Systems, but ultimately it is a database that houses this information and is going to connect following that workflow that Kristen shared to other systems within the state. And so if you are familiar with the CLIP resources page, there is additional information that's available on there. We can share a link to that in the chat in a moment, but specifically that can have, there's like a resource guide and things like that in there, although it does also include information for, the CLIP portal as well. And so if this is your first time looking at that, maybe we can pause on that until you get an understanding of just what the general workflow is first before we pull up the resources, so there's not any confusion there. So to understand what we're going to be looking at with this checking process, we utilize an application within Enterprise called Equidata Processor. And what it does is it allows you to upload your EDDs, just sort of drop them into the spot on the web page, and it's going to go through and look at all of those EDDs, check to make sure that they have all of the information that's required and that they're following the vocabulary that's been established. And if it's outside of the expectations of that data, you'll get a notice. You'll both in the web page and also an email if you're set up for email delivery saying, oh, there were some problems. There'll be details as to how to fix those. And then you can, go through that process and resubmit, fix up those, issues, that kind of thing. If it's successful, you get a notice saying, congratulations, it was received. It's very intuitive, I think, once you get a little bit of practice under your belt working through. There's a lot of color coding to help you with the process, but we'll talk through a couple of sort of the typical things that you might run into and some of the tools that are available to you to help out with this, okay? So in terms of some terminology that we're going to talk through really quickly, I did mention reference values or project vocabulary probably. Basically, there's going to be a list of reference values that you're going to need to follow when you're submitting this data. You can actually grab the drop down in the blank EDD template that's available to you that I believe has been distributed. It will include all of the expected, appropriate vocabulary, but this is controlled language that makes sure that when we're talking about a particular analyte, for example, we all use the same vocabulary, so there's not any disparate information in all of the other systems that are connected. Okay, so it's really important that you're using that appropriate vocabulary. Analyte, of course, is the term that we use for any of the substances that you're analyzing. So as Kristen mentioned, microbial is not necessarily part of this yet, but that would theoretically be considered an analyte when we get to that point. But basically anything that we're analyzing to quantify the concentration or presence is what we're going to be considering in that particular term. So in addition to that, we're also going to talk about the just general EDP terminology. And that means that when we're looking at the portal itself, which we'll log in here in just a moment, you'll see that there is in the EDD upload widget, a place where you have the format file information. You don't really have to know what makes up the insides of this, but basically the components here identify what the actual layout of the file should look like. So the order of the columns, the kind of data that's going to be included in there, like if it's numbers versus like text or things like that. And in addition, it'll also include things like a required field or any sort of conditional checks that might exist. Okay, so in terms of what we're talking about with those specifics, when you're populating your data in your EDDs, it's going to need to be in some sort of tabular format that can be read by Equus. So Access database is unlikely something that you'll be submitting with, of course, but an Excel workbook or maybe a delimited text file, if that's maybe what your LIMS is able to create, that's okay too. It just has to be in the structure that's defined by the particular format, which we have those examples of. Okay, so it'll be the appropriate, basically order of columns and the type of data in each column. And it's also going to have some elements where it's looking up what the appropriate vocabulary is for those given fields as well. This feels like German or Greek or Latin or whatever to you, that's okay. Got a couple more things that I'll talk through here for you. One of the things that's an important piece to understand when we're looking at our EDDs is that there are going to be some primary keys that are going to be crucial to populating these EDDs. Okay, in this case, there are 6 different fields that are primary keys in this format. That's the lab ELAP cert ID, the lab sample ID, the originating county source, the collection date, the collection time, and the analyte code. They're not necessarily in that exact order. There are some other columns in between them, but I did pull those out specifically so that you know the absolute bare minimum information that you have to include for a unique identifier. Okay, so you can have more than one record for a given combination of like sample ID, county, collection date, and time, but it's got to be differentiated by something else, like analyte code, for example. Okay. All right, so when we're talking about those EDDs, you'll notice that in the example files that have been provided, as well as the example file that you can download from the portal, you can obtain a file, actually 2 different kinds of files that will show you some of the EDD conventions. So if you see that red and bold, that means that it's a required field. If it's red and underlined, then it's primary key. I already mentioned that, of course. But so in this non-summarized screenshot here, you can see we've got lab sample ID and then composite yes, no is next to it. Lab sample ID is part of the primary key. It's required, but the composite yes, no isn't part of the primary key, but is still a required field, meaning it's not going to, the composite yes, no is not going to be like a differentiator for uniqueness, but you do still need to populate it. Okay. As Kristen mentioned, there are other fields in here that are not required, but if you have the information available, we do want that to be included. And if there is any field that has a blue indicator on it, that means that there's some sort of reference value or controlled vocabulary that's going to be necessary there. All right. So what we're going to talk about next are some of the specific format checks. This is really a brief overview. We'll take a look at this in a little bit more detail. And if you have any questions about them, we can certainly get into that. But the kind of checks that are going to come into play here within the portal are things like looking to make sure that you've populated the required fields, making sure that all of the data that's provided is within the field and data type requirements. So not too long, not an unexpected data type. So like if you put in a text value in a numeric field, for example, making sure that dates are valid. Date validity can be like not March 52nd, or if you're trying to enter a date for a date that hasn't happened yet, it'll also flag that kind of information. Those reference values, as I mentioned before, which are going to be those vocabulary that we're talking about. And then any kind of cases where we run into duplicate rows and that kind of thing. Like Kristen said, we have a couple of different components within the EDD that are going to establish that uniqueness. And we think that that has been well thought through. There's a lot of discussion around that, making sure that we got that right in terms of making sure that we have managed uniqueness as best as possible. But if you have questions about that, you can certainly reach out to the team. And then there also can be things related to range checking in the checks, but you don't really have to worry too much about that. We're really looking at just the top lines that are going to be occurring in this particular format. Specific things that might show up here, your EDD submitter must have a valid ELAP cert ID. You need to make sure that you have some, valid date time fields. As I mentioned, March 52nd wouldn't work. Also, a date in the future is not going to work either. So it does actually look up to a real calendar and make sure that that information makes sense. And if you have included information in a field that's like a numeric field, like a result value, for example, then it's also going to expect that you include other information like units so that it knows, what value we're actually reporting. And if you put units in, it's going to expect that you populate something in a numeric field. Okay, there are flags and highlights in any of these cases where there are these kinds of checks that are in play. So if you're thinking that this is going to be really tricky to figure out how to populate, there are, landmarks to be able to help you get that in there. And once you have practiced this a little bit, hopefully it'll become a little bit easier for you to be able to work through and populate the information that's necessary. All right, so back to those reference value conversations again, when we're talking about, things like our analyte code and analysis method code, you can't just make those up. They do need to refer to the specific reference values. If you feel like there should be an analysis method code and it's not represented, that's a separate conversation, but it does, if you want to be able to successfully submit data against existing valid values, then you need to refer to that reference value list. You need to make sure that you're reporting your result and reporting level values in non-scientific notation and that they are numeric. And this is my fault. I included a piece about PS code. Ignore that. We're still talking about the APNs here. But in the case where we're looking at things like less than indicator equals to Y, then you need to make sure that the result and result units are also null. So there's some other sort of rules in here that'll pop up. If you try to populate one way, there'll be an alert saying this isn't quite how it should look, and then a note onto how you can change that. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about what it looks like to load data into the domestic well portal. We're going to access the portal here, and I don't think I have access to share the link. You should have received it, of course, as part of the invite, but that's going to be that the link to the site where you need to create the credentials in order to log in for that web portal. So you're going to put in your credentials and your password and sign in. And once you've created that account, it is something that has to be approved. So if you're just now doing it, Jeffrey's in there looking to make sure that everybody gets approved, and there's not going to be an alert that lets you know. You'll just have to try again with your new username and password shortly. If you have any troubles with that, you can let us know in the chat, but we're not going to be troubleshooting that during this session today. All right, so once you log in, you should be faced with something that looks like this, the Domestic Wells Dashboard, okay? It says EDP at the top. There is an EDD upload widget. It's very simple. There are some buttons that maybe don't quite look like buttons in the grid up above, and I'll talk about those more specifically in a little bit. But by default, that drop-down list will say CA Domestic Well Analytical Data. That's the format that you're going to be loading data against. If you have already created the EDD, all you have to do is drag and drop that into that little dotted outline area to upload to that to the portal, or you can browse to find the file if you prefer. If you need to create the EDD, there are the tools available to you to figure out how to do that on this page if you've misplaced the blank file that was provided ahead of this session as well. There's also an EDD status widget below that once you've loaded data will show you how you're doing, basically give you a status update as to what the process is for your EDDs being submitted. Okay. Before you do that though, you need to make sure that you choose the correct county for your data. That's the originating county source. As Kristen mentioned, we're working on making this a little bit simpler if you're going to be submitting EDDs when you have multiple different counties in question. But for now, we want to make sure that you go and click that box up at the top. It might not say CADDW Domestic Test Facility. It might have a county name, Contra Costa, whatever, up in that button. You want to click that button and select your originating county source and then upload your EDD. Okay. All right. The next thing, like I said, all you have to do is drag that file into that dotted line area or select the browse button and navigate to the EDD that you're ready to upload. And then once that process begins, you can check how it's going in your EDD status widget. If it's moving along, you might have to refresh it to see this, but you'll see a little blue question mark that's basically showing you that it's in process. If you refresh and your EDD doesn't show up in this EDD status widget, you might try uploading it again. It should show up in there immediately. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But as it works through the process, you ultimately will either get a green button or green light rather, which means congratulations, you did it. It's been successfully uploaded, or something red. If you get a red indicator, then that indicates that there are errors in your submittal. But you don't have to worry too much about that. I mean, of course, you have to fix them and resubmit, but there are going to be some landmarks to help you work through those errors. If you need to download that file again to look at it, you can if somehow it's no longer available to you, like you come back to check later and discover that it's not working. That first link next to the colored dot is going to let you download the EDD. If you want to download the error message, you can grab that from the area in the lower right that has that orange box around it. Additionally, if you have set yourself up to receive notices via email, you will get an email saying your process or your EDD submission is in process and successful, or there was an error. And if there are errors, it will also include that error log. I'll show you an example of an error log in just a moment. Okay. Ah, there it is. There's an error message that might appear in your email address. Okay. It's going to come from, in this case, in the test environment, the CADDW domestic test.noreply@equusonline.com. You might have to whitelist that email address. And for production, that email address will be slightly different, but you should receive a message like that if you are signed up to receive messages via email. Okay, and the attachment that's included with that will have a page that includes all of the errors that occurred when you tried to upload the EDD with some details as to how you can fix them so you can adjust your file and then resubmit it. Your EDD error messaging will look something like this, although this particular EDD that I created and uploaded is especially egregious because there are some required fields that I didn't populate. The landmarks that are in the blank EDD showing me I should fill this out, like the red and bold and that kind of stuff, I just flat ignored because I wanted to have an example of what kind of error messaging you might see. But you can see that it'll tell you the total number of errors at the top of that. It'll give you the column that has the issue, the line number with the specific error, and then whatever the message is. So if you have an invalid data type, like you can see for that collection timeline, 120::, not a time. So it didn't like that at all. If you've missed a required field, it'll tell you about it, or if there's a field length issue or anything like that. Okay.
Hey, Liz.
Yes.
There's a question here of whether or not folks should be uploading some test documents right now. What are your thoughts on that?
You're welcome to give it a shot. We're going to walk through it together right in a moment, but if you want to give it a try just based on the instructions that I've given you in the slides, good luck. Absolutely.
Thanks, Liz.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. So last piece here is another tool that's available to you for resolving those EDD errors. Under the EDD upload widget, which is going to be above your EDD status widget, there's that column that says EDD description. The Excel file icon there actually will let you download the EDD description file, and that's going to give you more information about the stuff that might need to be in that in those particular fields. So if you're running into trouble with resolving errors in your EDD, even using that blank EDD file with the reference values included and everything like that, you might get some more hints from that EDD description. It'll have more details about what's expected for that field and that kind of stuff that might be a little bit useful for you. All right, so next steps are, let's do it together. So let me get out of here and we're going to log in together. I am using a generic trainee to work through this process today. And I've pre-populated my email address and password. And of course, that's going to be going to that https://caddwdomestictest.equusonline.com. You do have this link already, but if you need to type it in, that's the address that we need to navigate to. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in here. And as I said, it will take you directly to that EDP dashboard. So up here at the top is your EDD upload widget. Down here below is your EDD status widget. But first, don't forget, we have to tell Equus where we are or what county specifically we were loading our data against. So we're going to mouse up to our upper right-hand corner and find the little pin in the map. Mine says CADDW Domestic Test Facility. Yours might say something different. That's okay. You just need to make sure that you click on that button and then pick the corresponding county for which you're uploading data against. I'm going to pick Contra Costa. Okay, so I have selected Contra Costa as my data that my facility that I'm going to be uploading data against. And now it's time for me to navigate to my particular EDD, my test file, and upload it. And now you can either click the browse button to select it and upload it, or you can, like I'm going to, grab it from a specific location that you might have handy. I've actually already tried to upload this file once, but I'm going to do it again anyway against a different facility. So I'm going to click and drag that into that dotted line box. And then I'll wait a few beats in case you're trying to look back and forth between my screen and yours. And once it's successful, or once it's, I should say, queued up and ready to upload, you should see that upload box there with a 0 of, and then however big that particular file size is. And then you can go ahead and click upload. Okay, you get that little checkbox. Then it's ready, it's starting to cruise, it's working on its process. If several of us are trying to do this together or at the same time, in this training environment, we might have sort of an odd, or I shouldn't say odd, we might have a little bit of a backlog just of all of us doing this at the same time. That's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and click my close button in my upload box, and I wanna check on my EDD status down here below. Now you can refresh the whole page, or if you mouse up to your menu up in the upper right-hand corner of your EDD status, you can click on that button and just hit refresh. Those 3 dots will get you your refresh menu. Boop. And then you can see what's going on with your EDD upload status. Remember, blue means in process. So we're just waiting for some things to happen here. Okay. While we're waiting for that to work through what it's up to, I do have an example EDD here that was provided ahead of this, where you can see we've got, our all of our primary key fields, which are indicated by the blue or the bold and red, and then the required fields with the just bold fields. I'm sorry, bold red underlined is primary key, bold and red is going to be those required fields. And if you're curious for more information as to what you need to populate in here, you can click or hover over that second line and it'll tell you more information. So provide relevant information about the first and last days of composite dates, or for the APN, the assessor parcel number. That's maybe not quite as descriptive, but that's sort of a piece in progress, as Kristen said earlier. You can also notice if you scroll over, there are more, columns that are required to populate. So collection date and time, sample type, and lab receipt date. All of those are going to be important. And there are some spaces where there are empty spots in our EDD structure. Those are important. You need to make sure that you have those empty spots in your file. Don't remove those, because that will take your structure out of the intended structure. Those are there basically to accommodate for the growth and the type of data that's going to be loaded to the system in the future. So there's sort of empty placeholders. So they are important, just not necessary for data at this moment. But you would need to populate basically everything that is red in this EDD. And then notice if you see things like this with the reporting level units or result units. Blue indicates that it has a lookup, meaning there's some sort of vocabulary, controlled vocabulary we need to populate. Okay, I happen to have handy the EDD that we were looking at with the errors before this. You can see that I've got a manufactured ELAP certification ID. I know that is already too long. It's only a 4-digit ID after all. So I'm going to get an error message related to that anyhow. But you'll need to make sure that you populate these particular fields. In addition, if you're using the pre-populated reference value blank EDD, you'll see that there is a drop-down available. In any case, there is some sort of lookup where you can select the specific value that is part of the reference vocabulary. So you don't have to just have that list, in the wild. It is handy in this if you're going to be manually creating these EDDs. You try to add something that's not in a valid value list, it will shout at you and it won't save it. Okay, let's check on our EDD status here. Go ahead and hit refresh. That's still thinking. I sort of expected it. That's okay. The next thing I'm going to do is scroll up to my EDD description section right here. That's going to be in our EDD upload widget, because that's the place where I can look for more information if I run into errors. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that little Excel icon underneath EDD description next to the domestic well analytical data. It doesn't really matter because they're effectively the same format, but for precision purposes, I'm going to select that specific. And then I'll go ahead and open up that file. It's going to look similar in the tabs at the bottom, but the structure is different. Don't try to put data in this sort of structure because Equus won't recognize it. The portal doesn't know what this is, but you can see there's maybe some more information that might be a little bit easier to read in terms of what kind of data is expected, and maybe a little bit more information as to, like, for example, these placeholders that exist or that kind of thing. So if you want to know, more details about the EDD structure itself or any sort of lookups or that kind of thing, it's all going to be in there and maybe give you some hints as to the kind of stuff that needs to be populated. Okay. All right. Now, given that we're waiting for this to load, and it might take a fair amount of time as it's in queue with other folks loading data as well, I'm just going to refresh one more time. And it's still unsuccessful. So I am actually going to go back and select the original facility that was used to upload the EDD previously, just so you can see what this process looks like in retrieving an error message. You don't have to do this part with me. This is just so that we have a demo that you can follow if you run into errors. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting the facility, or what would be the county that the EDD I'm interested in was uploaded against. And in this case, I tried uploading this EDD to the non-county facility right there, right? And so there's that error in my EDD status widget. It's red. That's bad. That means there's errors. So if I click the little triangle to the left of that particular row, it'll maximize my space. I can download the EDD if I need to change it. It'll be in a zip format, but I still have the file I could go edit on my machine, thankfully. And if you want to look at the specific issues, you can go ahead and click on that file name there, and then it will download that for you. Or if you have email set up, if you're set up on email delivery for this, you'll also have an email address or an email in your inbox saying, there were problems, and here's an attached error log as well. Okay. So I actually happen to have that error message handy already. This is that error log. And so it's showing me that there's information issues with my ELAP cert ID for two reasons. First, this is not in the database valid value list. And second of all, it's not in that list because it's too long. It should be 4 digits long. So I need to actually get a valid ELAP cert for the lab that I'm uploading data against in order to be able to proceed. It's upset at me because I haven't given any sort of detail as to sample point descriptor, sample type, lab receipt date, analyte code, analysis start and end, start date and time rather, as well as the analysis method code. All of those are going to be required fields that it needs to have populated. If you have detection, you need to make sure that you've populated the result and the result units. And the less than indicator needs to say N. If there is a non-detect, then you would say the less than indicator equals Y, and then these two fields would be null. So it's mad because I have everything null. Sometimes they might be null, depending on the case of a detect or a non-detect, but that is the kind of contingent check that exists in this EDD format. There are obviously other columns that are available to populate in this EDD. And like Kristen said earlier, if you know the information, by all means, please include it. But as much detail within, correct and precision as possible. Okay. So hopefully the information that you're expecting to populate is available to you so that you can address any of those issues. And once you've done that, it's always a good idea to rename the EDD with just like a V1 or some sort of revision naming so that you can tell the difference between the original one and the one that you're ready to upload that's been fixed. And then at that point, you can go through the exact same process again of making sure that domestic well analytical data is there as the dropdown. It's default, so it should be. And then you click and drag that file into this upload space and then wait until you get the congratulations, you fixed the errors and it was success message. Okay. All right, that was rapid fire information. So let me know what kind of questions you might have if we want to go through the process again, or if you ran into some odd behaviors or whatever. Let's hear about it.
Thanks, Liz. I am looking at the questions and trying to see if there's any that are specific to the demo that you gave, because I still see a lot of questions kind of around from a county perspective around how to deal with missing data or inventories. Let's see.
I think there is one question about the valid values or analyte code and sample type.
Address that.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a few different ways that you can receive this information. I would say that the resources page is probably the best place to get this from. So that's going to be from the link. Let me see if I can put this in the chat. I might not have permissions for everybody. Okay, so this particular resource page has information for both domestic wells and the public water systems. So the reason we didn't share this out at the top is because I didn't want there to be too much confusion. However, you can obtain the list of the valid values if you scroll down to the reference value tables down here. It's about 3/4 of the way or so down above the form section. So it's the last entry in that first table. If you download that, that's going to give you the information that you're going to need related to things like your ELAP certification or things like that. Should be available to you there. I believe that things like the analyte code and all of that are also going to be in that list.
And Liz, there's a question of whether or not should they be using the Equus EDP standalone to prepare and check a file first before uploading?
It's not required. It's certainly, if you already have EDP standalone and you know how to use it, then you're more than welcome to do that. That just gives you the double check so that you can catch any sort of errors before you get to the upload process. Because this is the first pass with this, we wanted to just give the opportunity to have the web portal part. If you want to obtain the EDD format to check an EDP standalone, you can just click the name of the format in the EDD upload widget. That'll download the file you need to load into standalone EDP before you load the EDD. It's a great question.
Thanks, Liz. And then we've got another question. Are we still allowed to use the current Equus EDP processor to create an EDD file from our LIMS systems? If so, please let us know how to rename the tab in the EDD file to upload it.
So that's a really good question. My answer is probably, because I don't know exactly what your processor looks like. I would say that the important thing here to note is there are two different formats for public water systems versus domestic wells. They look similar, but they're not the same. If you try to submit data for one group versus another with the wrong format, you're going to get errors because the fields are not going to be the same and the required data and all that is not the same. Okay. That being said, if your LIMS is able to export into different file structures, making sure that your IT or whoever's doing that mapping has the two different format structures and requirements differentiated is a good place to start. If you need to give them a file for that information, the EDD description or the blank EDD template is a good place to go. So yes, probably you can still use, your automatic export process, assuming it's mapped correctly. And if you're using, EDP standalone to check it, you can do that as well, but you'll need to make sure that you're referencing the correct format for this portal.
Thanks, Liz. Lisa asked if there's a specific file naming convention.
Great question. So the file naming convention is going to be, I'm going to have to double check with this to be certain for you, but the naming convention, if you include dots in the names, that might accidentally, or that might trigger Equus to think that you're trying to use a specific naming convention. So like if you put in a number and then a dot and then, I don't know, your lab ID or something, and then like .xl, it might confuse the system. If you want to have separators, you can use underscores, that kind of thing, but we'll follow up with the specific naming convention requirements after the session. I'll have those handy.
Thanks, Liz. We do have someone who's having trouble opening up the domestic well blank EDD. It's saying that they don't have permission to view. Maybe they should get in touch with Jeffrey Albrecht at the water boards. We can send you what we have if you're having problems.
Yeah, I think it's the link that Liz just shared, or that reference page. That download link appears to be not working.
Oh, this one? Oh, shoot. Okay, we'll have to figure out what's going on with that, and we'll make a note of that and follow up with the recording with that.
Yeah. So I want to address some of the broader questions that have come in around historical data and who's responsible for what, because we've got a lot of folks asking questions about process. So first I want to address historical water quality data. So for historical water quality data, counties and labs, you do not need to report that data through this CLIP portal. Again, I'm going to say that again. Historical domestic well and state small water quality data does not need to be reported through the CLIP portal. If you have that data in a machine readable format and you can send it to us in an Excel document, we would love to have it. You can email Jeffrey on our team, but you do not need to use the CLIP portal to send us any historical water quality data. Another question that's popping up in a few places in the Q&A is around who's responsible for what. So counties are responsible for maintaining their state small water system and domestic well inventories. Now, that will be done in the clearinghouse, in the Safer Clearinghouse. Counties, unless you're running your own accredited laboratory, are not responsible for using this CLIP reporting feature to submit water quality data to the state. The the water quality data must be coming directly from the labs. That is a direct quotation from the legislative requirements in SB 200. Water quality data has to be submitted electronically through the labs, not from the counties, unless it's a county-run lab. Now, the question that remains, though, is what data points do the labs need to collect to submit this data to the state? And that's the, for domestic wells, it's that APN number, it's the county source, the data points that we showed you in the EDD. And that's where you need to work with your county counterparts to make sure that when a new well or an existing well is being sampled and that data is being, has to go to the county, then you should make sure that that data is provided to the laboratory. So you may need to update, your business processes or requirements for those who are coming in for a new permit for a well. Make sure that they're submitting this information when they are doing their water quality sample as part of your permitting process. And we know that not all counties require this as part of permitting, but if you do, then you need to make sure that they're aware of what data needs to be submitted to the lab. So hopefully that answers a good chunk of these questions in here. I'm going to keep going through here. Let's see, David asks, will the state small water system inventory that is set up in SWS be transferred to the clearinghouse? Yes, David, it will be. And again, we're going to be working on developing this further in the clearinghouse so you can maintain it. If you have any changes in the meantime, before we launch the clearinghouse portal for counties, please send any changes that you have to Jeffrey on our team so that we can make sure that it's up to date in the meantime. So hopefully that answers your question. Another Guadalupe, yes, this presentation will be made available after today. How far back is considered historical water quality data? That is a good question. It is in the legislation, and I'll just go back to that slide that quotes SB 200. It does say any water quality data collected after January 1st, 2014 should be submitted to the state if you have it. Again, the Water Board prefers the data in a machine readable format, and Jeffrey does have spreadsheet templates that you can use to submit that data to us. It is posted on our website, but Jeffrey, when we send out the slides and everything, maybe we can call that out so that counties know how to submit that historical data. Let's see, we've got trying to make sure I'm going through all your questions and answering them. This one has been done. As a laboratory, is it the responsibility of the client or customer to provide all the required info in the EDD if expected? Yes, again, this is kind of why we are emphasizing that chain of custody requirements and getting the county and the labs kind of working together to make sure that that private domestic well samples include the necessary data in order to comply with these reporting requirements.
And I saw, Kristen, there's part of a question earlier that I missed, so I want to come back to that.
So go ahead and address that now so I can clean up the Q&A for the ones that are about.
Sure. It says, if you do not have information for one of the red columns, can there be an unknown text added? And that's probably a question for you. So any of the required fields in the EDD, if they don't know the answer, what kind of information should they be providing?
If they cannot provide the required data, then they're not going to be able to submit it. So that's where working with the your client or the domestic well owner, whoever sampled their well and or the county to try to complete those data points.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've answered this one. Typically, domestic wells in our county are only sampled one time in their life as part of the process for receiving sign-off for the permit. This means perpetual assignment of unique identifiers, correct? Yes, we are trying to, again, assign unique identifiers for all wells. Oftentimes when this is happening, it's easier to do it for, as new wells are permitted instead of trying to retrospectively apply something to older wells. Again, we are working across the state to try to figure out if we can come up with a better solution. But we are trying to create those unique identifiers for at least the new wells that are being permitted now, and also any well that we receive water quality data from, knowing that some counties, not all, but some counties have, voluntary monitoring programs, or there's other state efforts to do monitoring work in their county. The CV Salts program is a good example. So again, trying to create those identifiers for water quality data as it comes in. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, I think I've answered that question. Let's see. That one's done. That's done. Historical data. That's done. Someone's asking, apologize in advance. So if the state small did not include the required information such as collection time or analysis start time. Yeah, unfortunately, if you just don't have the information to submit the data, then you're not going to be able to submit it. That's just the validation checks that we have in place. So Paresh, we need, we're asking for some business processes to be modified or updated in order to accommodate for these new reporting requirements. Do we upload data when property is sold and requires a water quality analysis? These are often submitted by the realtor. The answer to that is yes, Lisa. That's if that's required by your county, then the answer is yes. So for historical data, it can come from the county or only from the lab. Historical data can come from the county, So hopefully that has been answered. For further clarification, is Equus more for use by labs than counties? That is correct. Equus and the CLIP portal are for the county, or I'm sorry, for the labs. Again, if you run your own lab, then you should be familiar with CLIP. We invited the counties today so that you understand the life cycle of this water quality data and why it's important for you to be coordinating with your labs, especially around domestic well water quality reporting, because there is going to need to be updates in your chain of custody and updates to how you communicate with those who are trying to permit new domestic wells, so that they understand what information needs to be provided to labs, and to make sure that that data is then submitted to the state. So Nick, hopefully that answers your question. Okay. I think we've answered most of these. I don't know if anyone else on the panelist team sees any question that we haven't been able to address yet. Tammy, I think you had a question in here. I'm used to working with public water system data, which are uploaded through CLIP using the PS code. This can only be easily done for state smalls with PS codes, but it sounds like counties are responsible for uploading. No, counties are not responsible for uploading the domestic well water quality data through CLIP. But you need to make sure that for your state small water systems that we do have the basic inventory and the facility information in SWRCB. If you send it to us, we are entering it into SWRCB on behalf of counties. So we are doing that data entry into SWRCB to make sure that you can work with your labs to ensure that that state small water quality data is now submitted through the CLIP portal for water systems. So hopefully, Tammy, I'm not sure if that addresses your whole question, but please let me know in the Q&A if you have a follow-up to that. We have another question here. Does the platform use the same vocabulary .rvf as the original CLIP, Liz?
So that's a good question. They are actually two separate databases, but the intent is for the vocabulary to be the same between both groups. If there is a need to add a new method or analyte, there might be a little bit of lack of parity, we'll call it, as one system is updated and then the other. But for the most part, like the vocabulary used for things like analyte code and analytic method and that kind of thing should be the same. In terms of like the actual reference values being used interchangeably, I'm not sure that that's possible, just because the formats themselves have slightly different structure. You can try it, but I wouldn't sign it off as perfect, I suppose.
Thanks, Liz. Nick was asking about the kind of the definitions of what we're asking for, and that was, I think, provided in the invitation document as on the resource page, I believe. But Jeffrey, can you clarify for me?
The where those resources are available?
Yeah, and the definitions in particular.
If you look at the that EDP page, Liz, you had it up. That EDD descriptions, the previous page.
Oh, the previous one, sure.
That EDD descriptions column has the if you do the data, that's the file that in that Excel file. There's a tab that has the definitions in it.
So it looks like this. The comment information that shows up in the tooltip in the blank EDD basically is this information that's in this column. The lookup information, in this case, if it's just a short list, it'll say enumeration and whatever that list is. If it has another lookup like these guys listed in blue, there's actually going to be a reference value table. And since it sounds like that particular link that's provided on the resources page that I shared isn't active for everybody, we can follow up after this with the appropriate list. You can download that RVF file from here, but that's only readable if you have an XML reader, and it's not really that user friendly. So we can get you an Excel output that's easier to reference.
Thanks, Liz. Another question from a county asking around, you know, currently their business process is that they only require water quality sample for domestic wells during, you know, new permit issuance. And typically they require the owner, not the lab, to submit that water quality data to the county. And so again, kind of like who's responsible for the uploaded data. The requirements in SB 200 require for the State Water Board to receive the water quality results directly from the labs. So you need to make sure that the laboratory that did the analysis for that homeowner submitted that water quality result to the state. Now, one way that you can do that is to log into the Safer Clearinghouse when we launch that portal, and to ensure that that result came in for that newly permitted well. So you do not need to upload anything to the clearinghouse with the water quality result, but you should be ensuring that the laboratory did submit that data for that newly permitted well. So hopefully that answers your question. Will data uploaded in the test environment be official, or should we wait for the final platform to actually upload data if you're not interested in practice? Liz?
That's a great question. I actually just posed it to our team. So that is, I believe that there is a plan to, like, anything that's done in the test environment doesn't count. So you will need to upload it officially to the production environment when that is live. But not, yeah, we're not going to try to carry over anything from the original environment, I don't believe.
Thanks, Liz. I think that's a really important clarification. Anything you do in the test environment is not official. It's literally just a playground for you to test things out with the new EDD template. So once it goes live, which will be in early February, and we'll send out an email, you'll want to switch over and start using the official platform, right, Liz?
That's correct. And I believe that you'll need to create new credentials for the official platform because it'll be a different environment. We can confirm that though ahead of time in case that I'm misunderstanding that.
That's right. Richard asks whether or not labs know of this requirement. What outreach has been done to labs? Should we assume they know all of this? Richard, that's a fantastic question. We have been doing outreach to both county and labs for this requirement, but we are hoping that our county partners will help us further emphasize the need for labs to report this data. It's interesting in that the requirements for SB 200 specifically say that county environmental health departments are responsible for this, and they're responsible for making sure the labs are doing this reporting. But we're trying to give counties and labs, as much information as possible. We did send out a letter from the State Water Board to county environmental health officials with the SB 200 requirements and kind of our legal language around compliance with these. This was actually a request made by laboratories. They said, if our county can provide a copy of this letter, that way we have it and we can point to it as to why we need to be reporting this data. So I encourage you to share a copy of that letter with your laboratories to help them understand these new requirements. But again, that's why we're doing this outreach. We're doing training. We're going to try to host another training after the launch of CLIP in a few weeks, so we can continue to coordinate with labs. But Richard, if you have any suggestions on how we can improve our outreach, we'd really appreciate your feedback. All right. Mark asking a really great question. Do you have an ETA on the clearinghouse portal, and when will you notify us when it's launched? Mark, we're hoping to have this clearinghouse portal developed within the next 6 months. Unfortunately, our IT developers are currently focusing on some drought priorities right now. We're trying to hire more IT developers at the State Water Board so we can get the county portal completed. It was supposed to be completed by the time we launched CLIP, but because the drought emergency took priority, we had to refocus our IT priorities. So I'm hoping within the next 6 months, we'll be able to have the clearinghouse portal for counties available. If you are interested in being involved in that development process, if you have ideas of how you'd like to be able to manage this data, view this data, extract this information, please reach out to us so that we can include you in our development team. All right, got a lot more questions just came through. And yes, the Safer Clearinghouse is going to be accessible for counties. Again, we're going to allow you to create an account, a county account, so that you can manage your state small water system and domestic well data. If you're an LPA county, you're also going to be able to see and access your data related to the systems that you help regulate. Richard asks, will labs that do not attend or get an invite be able to watch this training? Yes, this is being recorded. We're going to be making it available on our website and sharing the PowerPoint slides on our website as well. We'll try to be emailing these out too. Again, this is one of many trainings we're hoping to do. There will be more opportunities to engage. We want to make sure that laboratories have opportunities to ask us and our Equus partners questions in a live format, because I think that is really beneficial to everybody. So more to come. This is one of many. Okay, we answered these. How soon once the data is submitted by laboratories, will there be a confirmation that data has been submitted via email? And I think Guadalupe, maybe you can provide a bit more context, but are you looking for a notification from the labs? I'm assuming you're with a county. Are you looking for an email notification that we've received a water quality sample? If that is the question that you're asking, then when we're building out the clearinghouse portal, we can set it up so that county accounts get a notification when we receive a new water quality sample from through CLIP. And we're hoping that you'll be able to set your notification frequency. That way you're not being spammed with a million emails, depending on how many water quality samples your county is processing. So Liz, though, any word? I think we're doing it that CLIP. It's pretty instant, right? Once they upload the data, and then
that's a great question. So it depends on when you basically get in the queue and how many other EDDs are in the queue ahead of you. In the test environment, it can take up to 10 minutes for that to clear through. This one that I uploaded at 8:45 this morning, at 8:55, I got a notice saying there were errors. So that's pretty typical in that test environment. I just caught it at like the longest part of the process. Additionally, let me show you one quick thing. In the top menu in the upper right-hand corner, if you click on that and click on your username, that gives you the information of your options for or message delivery. By default, you're set up to receive email and web. If you set that to web only, then you won't get any emails at all ever. You'll have to come into here to see in the EDD status widget if something was successful. If you have this set to email, then any of the automated notifications that are in there will show up in your inbox when they occur. So that's a great question.
That is specific, though, to laboratory users of CLIP. I think if Guadalupe is a county employee, that it would be based on their preferences set up in the Safer Clearinghouse. So we're hoping, oh, okay, never mind. She's a laboratory. Ooh, that's even better. So as a laboratory, hopefully that clarifies how long it may take.
Yes.
And then you can manage your own email notifications.
That's right. And so if your username is set up per individual submitter within the larger lab, each of you is going to have your own, email address. And so different email traffic. If you choose to have a representative email address for whatever reason for your laboratory, then that's going, like anything that was submitted under that email address is going to receive all of the notifications. So that's an important thing to clarify too.
I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I think we're coming up on our end time of 12:30. So if anyone has any follow-up questions they'd like to ask us, please don't hesitate to reach out. We shared our email addresses. Jeffrey is available, and we have our ERSOP team too. Please play around in that test environment. If you find any bugs or issues, please let us know. We'd like to get those addressed before we officially go live. You should be receiving an email from us when everything is launching, which we're hoping will be early February. If you would like a copy of anything today, if you don't see an email from us with the information, and please reach out. We're happy to share. But again, it will be posted on our website, and we'll try to email everyone who attended today. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz.
Good luck, and let us know if you have questions.
Yep.